The ancient Sheikah of Hyrule were once a proud and prosperous race, bringing the land of Hyrule many technological wonders like the Guardians and the Divine Beasts. However, after using this technology to fend off from the first Calamity event 10,000 years ago, the Hyrulean Government felt threatened by the Sheikah's advancements, and forced them to part ways with it permanently. This decision ultimately divided the group into two separate factions: the hateful Yiga clan, who sought out to get revenge on the kingdom for their recent betrayal, and the remaining Sheikah loyalists, who abided by the kingdom by getting rid of their technology and living a life in peace. At least, that's how the legend tells it. Because fast forwarding roughly 10,000 years, when the kingdom realized that they needed to dig up this ancient technology to prosper in the next Calamity event, everything for the most part seemed to be in tip-top shape, and was restored to full working order in a matter of no time. On top of this, structures such as the shrines, which had no mention in the events 10,000 years ago, started to arise around this time, which would eventually help the player significantly in his quest to save Hyrule. With how accessible all this technology was after such a long span of time, were the ancient Sheikah really as loyal to the kingdom as legend said they were? Or have they been secretly working behind their back this whole time by creating and preserving their technology to help the future generations of Hyrule? To answer this question, we need to first compare the technology of 10,000 years ago to what can be seen in the game currently. As we know, the Guardians and the Divine Beasts were once prominent weapons used against Calamity Ganon in the fight 10,000 years ago, and make a return 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, when the kingdom learned that these weapons will be necessary to take Ganon down. However, given the large gap of time, one would think that restoring this technology to full working order would have taken a long time, but this turned out not to be the case at all. Part of this can be owed to the amazing build quality of these ancient machines, that allowed them all to stay in one piece when buried underneath the ground. But considering that the kingdom didn't know anything about the ancient Sheikah prior to finding their tech, how were they able to figure out the science behind these machines to not only restore their functionality, but also to be able to control them? One possibility is that the ancient Sheikah may have secretly buried instructions on how to use the Divine Beasts and Guardians alongside of them, so the future Hyruleans wouldn't have a problem with the restoration. However, this is just a prediction, because the game never tells us about the burial process of these ancient machines, and how much the Hyrulean government was involved in overseeing it. As far as we know, maybe the Sheikah technology isn't complicated to figure out at all, and that is why it was able to get restored so quickly. So there just isn't enough evidence about the Guardians and Divine Beasts to prove this theory right. But what about the shrines? These underground trials made by the Sheikah can only be entered by the hero, and after completing the challenge that lies within one, is rewarded with the Spirit Orb, which can be used to extend their power. These shrines can be found just about anywhere in Hyrule, but unlike the Guardians and Divine Beasts, there is no evidence of these structures existing during the Calamity events 10,000 years ago. This is probably because the ancient Sheikah were only focused on constructing weapons and machines for the Ganon encounter, and creating trials for the already developed hero would have been unnecessary. However, after the fight against Calamity Ganon was won, and the Hyrulean government stripped away their technology, the loyal members of the Sheikah had to have known that this was only putting future generations of Hyrule at risk, and something had to be done in order to prepare them for their next encounter with Ganon. Because of this, it is highly possible that the remainder of the Sheikah tribe were the ones responsible for building these shrines, as a way to test and power up the next hero of Hyrule. Since the Sheikah had to build these structures in secret from the Hyrulean government, this may explain why the shrines were all built underground, to prevent detection until the time that they needed to be used. However, you may be thinking, if the Sheikah had access to the Spirit Orbs to give the hero more power, what would be the point of locking them behind the challenges of a shrine, instead of just giving them away upon entry? Well, it is possible that the Spirit Orbs could have been bestowed to the Sheikah by divine power, under the condition that each orb will be locked behind some sort of test that the hero must complete first in order to prove his worth. This may seem a little far-fetched at first, but this wouldn't be the first time in a Zelda game where a divine power was responsible for sealing some form of reward behind a trial. Take Wind Waker's Tower of the Gods for an example, which was originally made to test the hero's skill to prove if he is worthy of entering the long-forgotten Hyrule Kingdom. Keeping this in mind, it is possible that the creation of these shrines could have been instructed by the gods, as a way to deliver power to the player upon proving his worth. And considering that the Spirit Orbs can only be turned into power after an exchange with the goddess statue, this could very well mean that the goddess Hylia was the one who bestowed these orbs upon the Sheikah in the first place. But besides just the shrines, there are many more Sheikah structures found in Breath of the Wild that could have been built by the same group as well, such as the 5 giant pillars surrounding Hyrule Castle and the Shrine of Resurrection. These structures and the shrines all have 3 major things in common. 1 is that they were all built to aid the future generations of Hyrule. 2, they all were constructed underneath the ground. And 3, there is no evidence of any of these structures existing prior to the Sheikah's banishment. This heavily contrasts to the rest of the Sheikah technology, such as the Guardians and the Divine Beast, which were all made prior to the banishment of their tech, and were meant to be used above the ground. Therefore, this could very well prove that the Sheikah never stopped working on their technology after it was banished from the kingdom, and instead, just moved all their work from above ground to below. They knew that the Hyrulean government was only putting future generations of Hyrule at risk by getting rid of their technology, so they knew that they had to continue working on it in secret in order to prepare the kingdom for the next attack. And despite the fact that Calamity Ganon would corrupt the Guardians and the Divine Beast upon his next return, things such as the Shrine of Resurrection and the shrines were still functional after all of that time to prepare the hero for his encounter with Ganon, and eventually seal him away once again. If the loyal Sheikah had never built these structures to help the hero, there definitely is a huge possibility that he would have never been able to stop Ganon, and Hyrule may have never been liberated from his clutches. Because of the Sheikah's secret underground work, they were able to properly prepare the future hero for his next encounter with Ganon, and ultimately save the future generations of Hyrule. Anyways, that is the end of this series. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss any future uploads. Also, a big shout out to my amazing patrons and YouTube members who help support the channel. I'll leave a link down in the description below if you would like to help me out here as well. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.